Hello again, class. This is Mrs. Politsky, and these are your notes for Chapter 30, Section 4, The Rise of the Pacific Rim Economies. And before I begin, I should just tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk a little bit about the Philippines. And a while back, we talked a little bit about colonialization. And I had mentioned that the United States was a little late coming to the colonial game. But the Philippines were one of our colonies. And from the time of 1898 to about the late 1940s, the United States occupied the Philippines. During World War II, the Japanese had invaded, and the Filipino people had to fight back. And as a result of fighting back, the United States remembered their courageousness and allowed them to have their independence. So, take a look at number 1. The Philippines gained their independence from the United States in 1946, again, following World War II. From that period of time, the United States did keep a military base within the Philippines. Wasn't necessarily governing the Philippines. That was done by the Filipino people. But there have been some up and downs in the government. So in the early 1970s, President Ferdinand Marcos had become an authoritarian dictator who had imposed martial law. Now let's stop here for a second. Martial law, I think the easiest equivalent to this would be like your parents grounding you. Not allowing you to have freedom of movement, imposing a curfew, except for rather than living, in a situation of being grounded in only your home. This is implied to the whole nation. So, he also arrested his opponents, and he stole millions of dollars from the nation. He was considered to be a very greedy man. And hence, this led to a lot of resentment among the Filipino people. In the early 1980s, Ben Aquino, or sometimes known as Nino Aquino, was a rival of Ferdinand Marcos. And in 1983, he was assassinated by the Marcos government. A few years later, in 1986, President Marcos allowed for elections, and Ben Aquino's wife, Corazon Aquino, who had been living in exile in the United States after her husband's assassination, was elected. And you can see her kind of in the yellow. That was kind of her trademark when she was campaigning. Aquino and other leaders have struggled to return the Philippines to a democracy. When Aquino was elected, first of all, she was the first female president of the Philippines, which was very remarkable. But she got the kind of the label of being wishy-washy. Now, a little while back, I had told you about Ferdinand Marcos having stolen lots of money. On the opposite side of the page here is his wife, Imelda Marcos. And you see her holding this cellular phone shoe. Imelda Marcos and her husband Ferdinand, after these elections, were disposed of. And they actually ended up fleeing the Philippines. And when some of the ordinary people of the Philippines entered their home, they found thousands upon thousands of pairs of women's shoes, which belonged to Imelda Marcos. She kind of had a fetish for that. The Marcoses were basically deposed of to the island of Oahu in the Hawaiian Islands, and that is where they died many years later. All right, thank you for listening.